Hello everyone, today is going to be a more upbeat and happy topic, I hope. I am a huge fan of the Phantasy Star games. Pre-online, post-online onwards not so much. But the original four and the couple of spin-offs they had, fantastic games. They are awesome. Now my first experience with Phantasy Star technically it was Phantasy Star 4. I used to hire it out from this video store every weekend back on the old Sega Mega Drive, Sega Genesis, however you used to know it as. I used to play it a lot. None of my friends really liked it. They always got sick of me playing it. But they liked the game in the end. Once they played through, got to know it as I did, they could see why I thought it was a good game, and it soon became one of their favourite games too. So I started with the fourth game. I absolutely loved it. This, I think, was actually my first JRPG turn-based style gameplay game. And it was fun. I loved the characters, the story, the music. I like how you could combine attacks. Yes, a lot of people have played games like Breath of Fire and Final Fantasy and whatnot, and this wasn't as new to them as it was to me, but I grew up from a Sega background and there weren't that many JRPGs available for where I was, and it was great. I loved it. You could go to different planets, party. The characters were great. The Japanese anime style cutscenes, well, it was more of a comic style cutscene, but it had the Japanese anime feel, art style I should say, and it was great. I got Phantasy Star 2, I used to hire that out as well. I thought that was a bit slower than Phantasy Star 4, but it was still good. The dungeons, oh my lord, were they ever confusing. Oh boy, did I get lost in those. Even the world map was very maze-like because you couldn't, you had to navigate through it a certain way. But I liked that game. Then I got Phantasy Star 1 for the Sega Master System from a second-hand store. Finally played the original. Awesome. Yes, it looks outdated and all that, blah, blah, blah. You want to say that and think that that's fine. I still like the way it looks. I still like the way it plays. I still like the music. I still like the characters. The problem was, and this was mostly the fact is the game that I bought was broken. You get to a certain point in the game and your save file will erase. There was no real reason. It seemed to be when you're roughly around the mid part of the game, it would erase. I don't know why. It was just an old cartridge. So I never got to complete that. And Phantasy Star 3, I played it on a ROM and it was alright. It was definitely the black sheep of the original four games. It wasn't even set in the same universe as 1, 2 and 4, but it carried on from the events of Part 2. Part 2 ended on a bit of a cliffhanger. But what I did like about Phantasy Star 3 was you had your character, you started off, and you get to a certain part in the game and you could marry person A or person B. If you married person A certain child was born from them. If you married person B, another child was born from them, and whichever character you married, their son would be the next person you play as, and then that son would go off and you'd have the option of marrying two people. So by the end of the game you would have ended up with one of the four grandchildren of the original character you played as, and this affected the story. This affected a lot of things like how your main character would fight. It would be a magic, a warrior type person, and that was great. And I know a lot of games have done that now, but for me that was a first time experience. I thought that was actually really good, but I never thought that Phantasy Star 3 was as good as 1, 2 and 4. So I got the Sega Mega Drive Genesis collection for the PlayStation 2 in 2007, and that came with Phantasy Stars 2, 3 and 4. Then 2009 they released it on PlayStation 3, and you could unlock Phantasy Star 1 by doing something really stupid. What was it? Oh yes, Sonic 2, you beat the first level boss by playing as Tails, 2-player. You gotta play as Sonic and Tails, but only Tails can hit the boss and kill him, or something to that extent. The other reason I got the PlayStation 3 version is because I had Shining Force 1 and 2 and Shining in the Darkness. I love those games. We'll talk about them later. So, a huge Phantasy Star fan. I didn't like Phantasy Star Online. I didn't mind it. I played the first one for the Dreamcast. It had its moments, but I didn't enjoy it that much all around when I think about it. It seemed fun at the time playing in it, but that quickly wore off. Then Phantasy Star Universe came out. Oh god, did I hate that. Had the character creation from Phantasy Star Online, and that was alright. Wasn't enough to save the game. I didn't like the main character Ethan. It drove me crazy. I wanted to see him get his head bashed in so many times. I didn't like Phantasy Star Universe, and now it's all like Phantasy Star Zero and that, which is the same combat-y, type thing as Phantasy Star Online and Phantasy Star Universe, but I don't like it. So what I want to talk about, 5 minutes into this video, new record for me, Phantasy Star V. There's been a lot of speculation as if they're making one. They're actually making a fan-made game called New Millennium. I don't know how that's doing. I haven't followed that in a while. People have wanted Phantasy Star V. They're saying, when are we getting Phantasy Star V? Here's the truth about what are my thoughts on this situation. I do not want a Phantasy Star V. I don't. Hear me out. Phantasy Star 1, 2, 3 and 4 are a great saga, and they have their couple of spin-offs which they're alright, but in terms of story I don't think you need them. You could argue if one was needed. I personally think it's not, but that's up to your personal choice. Phantasy Star 1 starts us off, and it starts us off with quite an impactful way for a video game. If you've seen it, you'll know what I mean. And you follow your characters, you get 4 characters, great RPG. You go to different planets, 3 different planets in that one, do quests. It becomes very open world mid-ish game. Yeah, around about that, and you can pretty much do what you like. Complete the game, all good. Phantasy Star 2, set 1,000 years later, and you have your character is having a dream. I'm trying to keep this spoiler free. He's having a dream about the events at the end of the first game, and he wakes up and it's a nightmare, and it's 1,000 years later in the timeline. Your characters from the original game are long gone. Hint, hint. You play through, and this one ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, which was kind of cool. And I remember when I completed that, well, I'd already bloody played Phantasy Star 4 by the time I completed it, but I remember playing it thinking, wow, these games would have been so good to play in order. Phantasy Star 3 takes place after an event in Phantasy Star 2, which is called the Great Collapse, and people had to leave the solar system for reasons. If you played the game, you'll know what I mean. Now, so this takes place in a different space place, and I'm guessing that the game is based over 30-50 years because of characters growing up and having children, etc, etc. It was fun. I liked it. Phantasy Star 4, you're back in the original Algo solar system, and it's 1,000 years after Phantasy Star 2, because they do mention the Great Collapse that took place 1,000 years ago. And there's even a submission where you find a crashed spaceship, and it's references Phantasy Star 3, and it says, your main character who's learning about the spaceships that left, he actually says, and this isn't line for line, quote for quote, he says, so these people are out there somewhere now traveling in space. It's an indication that at least the beginning of Phantasy Star 3 is happening at the same time Phantasy Star 4 is happening, and that was a cool connection. And you find lots of Easter eggs and references in Phantasy Star 4 which tie all 4 games, the previous 3 games, together in such an awesome way. And the finale, wow, that is one of the best finishings, not just to a game saga, but to a game. It ties up a lot, You complete Phantasy Star 4, you think back to the previous 3 games, and you think, wow, this is really the end, you know, and it gives it such an impact. The music, the comic anime style cutscene, really good, really good. Now, why don't I want a Phantasy Star V? Because it takes away from that ending. Okay, you make a Phantasy Star V, it's the fifth game, and to me that means it's continuing on from Phantasy Star 4. Okay, it's debatable, you could go the Final Fantasy route and have the game separate, but no, Phantasy Star, they are linked games. The one thing I did like about Online and Universe, and possibly Zero if I ever played it, was that it didn't reflect on Elgar. You could probably find some references in that, which is fine. That's alright, ties them in together in a small way, but it doesn't have any impact on the original Phantasy Star story's ending. The fourth game, the way that game ends, finishes off the story so strongly that I don't want a fifth game. I don't. Because it just, you're going to force this story to continue, and I don't think it needs to. There was, you know, talks about, New Millennium, the fan-made game, you know, taking a look at what life is like after the events of the fourth game. Alright, you could do that. I think that would be best suited for a novel or comic, you know, just an after story. That would be alright. That wouldn't be too bad. We don't need a Phantasy Star V. But what I would like, and this is the but, do another set of Phantasy Star games. Go back to the turn-based combat. Go back to what the original games had. Set it elsewhere. Have maybe small Easter eggs and references to the original full game, but set it elsewhere. Start a new saga, one that doesn't interfere with what we've seen from the original full games and affect that story. That I could get behind. That would be good. I would be completely behind that, 100%. But I don't want Phantasy Star V. The only way I could see Phantasy Star V working for me is if it was a prequel, you know, set somewhere in the 3,000 year timeline, which something happens, I don't know. Even then, that would be bending it, but I could probably bear with it and go, alright, that's not a bad idea, and I'd play it. I don't want Phantasy Star V. Give us a Phantasy Star game with the original magic of the games, the original combat, the original feeling, that great story saga, but base it elsewhere. Phantasy Star 4 was the best way you could finish the original Phantasy Star story. It went out strong, as strongly as it came in, impactful, you know, memorable, one of the best game endings I've ever seen. We don't need Phantasy Star 5, in my humble opinion. That's all I really want to say. I could go on about Phantasy Star for a bit more, but I don't want to. But there's something else that I don't think we need, and I'm not entirely sure that I want. And we're going to talk about that in the next video, because this will probably turn some heads. This is Diente. I'll see you then, but for now, I'm signing off.